Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 14 wide receiver rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be covering a variety of topics, beginning with a couple notes that I wanted to make on the running back video that I made yesterday. Again, there's a couple pieces of information that came up today, Wednesday, that are regarding the running backs. So we'll talk about a couple of my readjustments in terms of rankings, and then we'll move on to the wide receiver position. Again, this is a wide receiver episode. We'll begin by talking about matchups at the position, which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. After we cover the matchups, we'll go into our top 36 wide receiver rankings, for this week. Again, the wide receiver position, there is a lot of depth there. And honestly, I could legitimately name 48 wide receivers this week that I'm comfortable starting, maybe even 56 that I'm considering to go with this week. There are that many viable wide receivers, and being able to break down today's rankings did take me a while because, again, there are so many viable players and a lot of guys that are having breakout performances just recently in the last couple weeks that are giving them more viability in terms of being able to play them this upcoming week, also based on their matchups. So again, there's a lot of talent here. And there may be some guys that are missing on this list, but that does not mean that they are not valued and cannot be started this week. So I just wanted to go ahead and preface that to begin with. But again, we'll get into that. Before we begin, I want to thank you guys for your incredible support, helping out the channel. Hopefully, we can get you guys to the next round of your fantasy playoffs. For those of you who already have a bye week, sit comfortably, kick back, and just relax. Listen to me talk about some wide receivers today. If you have not yet already subscribed to the channel, we are creating fantasy football content for the entirety of the season. Of course, going into next season, 2021, it's going to be exciting to see how this thing grows out. But I appreciate you guys supporting the channel, clicking that subscribe button, clicking the like button down below, and commenting down below does really help make a difference. If you also are looking for specific players for me to talk about, you can go down in the description of the video and find timestamps down there. While you're down there, you can find the Patreon. I'm making extra content there for those of you who are trying to support the channel, extra outside of just the videos. And I also have the Discord link there for those of you who are trying to join and talk all things related to the fantasy football season. Okay. Now that we've covered that, I wanted to go ahead and talk about a couple pieces of information regarding yesterday's running back video. So we had a couple things come out today that have been official. So Joe Mixon is going to be out this week. Obviously, the coach for the Cincinnati Bengals came out today and said, hey, there's a possibility that he plays this season, but we are not giving him 100% firm stance on whether or not he is going to participate. Obviously, their season is over. They don't have Joe Burrow. They are not in any playoff contention. They're going to be done, and I don't think that they want to go ahead and bring back Joe Mixon. So there's a possibility that he does not play rest of season. Again, he did sign a contract extension this offseason, and there's a possibility that he could end up just sitting back, relaxing, not trying to get their franchise running back hurt for the future. But again, as it currently stands, he's probably not going to play, and I really don't like his matchups going forward, even if he does not play this week, which has pretty much been confirmed for weeks 15, 16, and 17. I'm not too interested in that, so again, I'm looking elsewhere if I can. Now, in terms of other positions at the running back spot, we also mentioned Christian McCaffrey. I think I had him at my number 5 running back spot yesterday. As of right now, the information has been revealed that he did suffer a quad injury last week during a personal workout with his trainer, all that kind of stuff at practice. Everybody practices on the field, but Christian McCaffrey's over on the sideline working out and getting himself prepared. Unfortunately, sustained a quad injury. As to what extent that is and how severe it is, it hasn't been said. He did practice limitedly today. If he can go ahead and have at least a full practice by Friday, I'll have enough confidence to say he's good to go. But if at any time this week Christian McCaffrey is to at least re-injure it and or make it even more of a severe injury, then Mike Davis will be adjusted into our rankings, in which of course he'd probably be a top, I want to say 20 running back this upcoming week, playing against the team that the Denver Broncos, which in my opinion aren't the greatest run stopping defense, but they've shown that they have a tendency of playing well against the run. But either way, just throwing that out as a contingency plan. J.K. Dobbins is the only guy other than that I wanted to mention. I would probably leave him at my number 19 spot. I did mention it yesterday because we hadn't watched the game, at least go through yesterday, because the video was being recorded prior to the Tuesday night football game. Based on the fact that Gus Edwards is getting just as many touches as him and is just as effective as him, it just seems to me that I don't think this team is going to, in a hurry, rush to giving J.K. Dobbins a starting role, because again, when Gus Edwards is, for majority of that game running for 10 yards per carry, and J.K. Dobbins is running for like 7 yards per carry, and they're just dominating on the ground. Lamar Jackson had himself a fantastic game. Leighton Vander Esch doesn't know how to fill a hole, but it is what it is. As of right now, it just seems to me that J.K. Dobbins, though he is getting touches, it is not a permanent thing for him to be the starter. So we are going to play it just, We're going to play it calmly. We're not going to 100% dive in on him. I'll leave him at 19. Just wanted to go ahead and re-mention that. After that, if anything changes as the week progresses, I'll let y'all know. Let's get into our wide receiver position, beginning with matchups at the position. I just wanted to go ahead and just kind of gloss over this. We know the Seattle Seahawks, the Minnesota Vikings, Atlanta Falcons, they give up a bunch of points to opposing wide receivers. They've done it all season long, beginning from week 1 when, Atlanta took on Seattle. They could not stop, opposing wide receivers. Same thing with Minnesota. They got torched in week 1 against Green Bay, and it hasn't stopped since. So, of course, teams are going to continue to expose these kind of secondaries. The Dallas Cowboys yesterday, Lamar Jackson had himself a great game in terms of passing, had himself 2 passing touchdowns, and got himself some work on the ground, even without having Mark Andrews in the lineup, which is a huge difference maker. Tennessee playing against Jacksonville, both these teams giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers this week. Again, Corey Davis, AJ Brown, DJ Chark, hopefully those are the best candidates to at least have some great performances this week. Speaking of AJ Brown and Corey Davis, the Cleveland Browns, they've given up a lot of points, and that was apparent this past week. But that being said, the Cleveland Browns do take on Lamar Jackson. If Lamar can go ahead and put together a similar performance and get Marquise Brown more and more implemented in this offense, that'll be nice to see. The Detroit Lions will take on Green Bay. That is going to be a tough slate for them. Of course, with Davante Adams playing as well as he has all season long. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that's a tricky one because, again, if Minnesota is giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers and so is Tampa Bay, there's a possibility we get a little bit of a shootout here, which I'm excited to potentially see, considering both these teams have been pretty, sustainable in terms of stopping the run for opposing offenses. We have the New York Jets playing against Russell Wilson, who hasn't been playing well. Maybe can go ahead and turn around in this matchup. We have Mitchell Trubisky and the Chicago Bears taking on the Houston Texans. Again, missing Bradley Roby is going to be the biggest difference maker for that secondary, something that we have to keep our eye on. Also, another player that got suspended was AJ Boye, the starting cornerback of the Denver Broncos. Keep an eye on that, and we'll talk about that in, as it pertains to Robby Anderson this week, because of course all the situations that are going on with the Carolina Panthers at this moment in time. But we go ahead and cover that. I also wanted to talk about some of the tougher matchups at the wide receiver position. We always talk about it. The Los Angeles Rams, they've given up the fewest amount of receiving touchdowns to opposing wide receivers this season, comparatively to all other teams. Even though DeAndre Hopkins did score 1 touchdown, he should have had 2. There was a play on a slant route down on the goal line. Of course, he had gotten beat, DeAndre Hopkins had beaten Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey had to pull him down in order to make sure he wasn't getting embarrassed out there. But either way, as of right now, they've been playing well against opposing wide receivers. You don't want to play any Patriots wide receivers against that defense this week on Thursday night. That's not going to be a fun one. But at least Washington, the Chiefs, Chicago Bears, Los Angeles Chargers, these are teams that have been consistent in terms of playing against opposing wide receivers. Denver, though they're at number 27, missing AJ Boye could be the biggest difference maker this week in terms of being able to bottle up opposing wide receivers. We'll see how that kind of transpires this week going forward. Okay, now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and move on to our top 36 wide receiver rankings going into week 14 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, like I mentioned before, if you have not yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community, and also, if you could do me the favor, click that like button. It does really help out a lot in terms of growing the channel. All right, there's a lot of names to be said. There's a lot of names that aren't going to be on today's list. Bear with me. Let's try to get through this. There's a lot of great talented players that we have to, of course, mention. Beginning off with our number 1 wide receiver, it's Davante Adams. Again, he's coming off of another fantastic performance. 10 catches, 121 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, 29.1 fantasy points. I mean, what more could we ask for? Really nothing. He's had an unbelievable slate of games. Since week 7, he has scored 11 receiving touchdowns. That is not a lot of time, but he is scoring touchdowns at a premium every single week. He has scored consecutive touchdowns. You can't ask for anything more. He plays against a fantastic matchup, even though earlier this season when he played against the Detroit Lions, he did go down with an injury and wasn't allowed to really at least flourish in the matchup. It honestly is going to be an easy one for them. Just recently, Will Fuller had himself 6 catches for 171 and 2 touchdowns against them, and Terry McLaurin 7 catches for 127 against that Detroit Lions secondary. So again, it is an extremely advantageous matchup. I anticipate Davante Adams to take advantage of it, and that is why he has continued to be our number 1 wide receiver. Tyreek Hill is our number 2. I don't know if you guys saw the clip, but Tyreek Hill on Sunday Night Football caught a touchdown, and no one even noticed it. It literally was tipped off of his hands, then was tipped off AJ Boye's hands, landed back in his lap. And no one realized. They thought it was a dead ball. Next thing you know, no one challenges the play, and they punt the ball away. He could have legitimately had his receiving touchdown, but unfortunately, wasn't accompanied by that. Regardless, he still had himself 10 targets, even though he didn't have the greatest game in terms of total fantasy production. We're talking about a player that since week 7 has had 73 total targets in the last 6 games, and also has had 9 receiving touchdowns in that slate of the last 6 games. He's unbelievable. He's playing out of his mind. And I think regardless of the matchup against the Miami Dolphins, I know they have Xavier Howard, who amongst all cornerbacks has the most interceptions in the National Football League. It is a different monster when you're taking on Patrick Mahomes in this offense. There's so much speed to cover that I think Tyreek Hill, of course, is going to get himself reestablished and have himself another great performance as our number 2. We have number 3, Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, of course, got shut down along with the entire Los Angeles Chargers offense. An unfortunate matter that took place this past Sunday. But that being said, he takes on the third easiest matchup at the wide receiver position as the Atlanta Falcons. They give up a lot of points. I mean, just talking about what Michael Thomas has done in 2 out of the last 3 weeks. Michael Thomas, on a minimum, has had 9 receptions and 104 receiving yards. In fact, he's had back-to-back identical performances. 9 catches, 105, 9 catches, 104. He was able to take advantage of that defense and play well. And I think Keenan Allen is of the talent of a Michael Thomas to be able to deliver and be able to at least have himself great performances based on the amount of opportunity he's been getting. Again, since week 7, he has had 83 total targets in this offense. I mean, with Justin Herbert, he's been a different animal. Other wide receivers that have produced against Atlanta recently, Justin Jefferson went for 9 catches, 166 and 2 touchdowns, while Jerry Jeudy, 7 catches, 125 and a touchdown. Again, these guys give up points to say the very least, and I think they'll continue to do so this week against Keenan Allen. We have ourselves DK Metcalf as our number 4. Now, even though DK Metcalf really did get bottled up by Bradbury of the New York Giants, I think this offense is slowing down. And hopefully this upcoming week against the New York Jets, a defense that gives up so many points. I think they give up, the 10th most points to opposing wide receivers. They have given up just recently a lot of points. And though they're not always leading to touchdowns, it is an incredible amount of points in terms of yardage and receptions. Just a couple of the performances. We had Devontae Parker, 8 catches, 119 yards. We had Keenan Allen, 16 catches, 145 and a touchdown. Jacoby Myers, 12 catches for 169 yards. And Tyreek Hill, 4 catches, 98 and 2 touchdowns. We have seen great performances. Even somehow, some way, Henry Ruggs showed up and scored himself a touchdown. I know it was a buzzer beater, but that being said, they've given up points to opposing wide receivers at a premium, and I think that is where they're going to take advantage of it the most this week. DK Metcalf should be a great play. Now, the next player, of course, a former teammate of DK Metcalf back in college, is AJ Brown. Now, AJ Brown, even though he didn't have the greatest performance of 8.7 fantasy points and a half PPR scoring format this last week, it was a matter of fumbling on the 1-yard line. Like literally, he caught the ball, is running towards the end zone, about to reach in to score a touchdown, gets popped out, they fumble, the other team recovers it. Now, if he ends up scoring that touchdown, he continues his trend of consecutively scoring touchdowns in every single game since his return. And he is just on that track of just being a top 12 wide receiver despite missing multiple games earlier in the season. But as of right now, his target count is not something that we can, throw up and say, hey, look at these opportunities. He's a modest guy. He's going to get himself 8 to 7 targets. He's going to get himself 4 to 5 catches. But what he's going to do is he's going to get a huge amount of yards after the catch, and he's going to impose his will on secondaries. Playing against Jacksonville, one of the easiest matchups, giving up the 6th most points to opposing wide receivers. Just recently, Justin Jefferson had himself 9 catches, 121, and 1 touchdown against them. Jarvis Landry, 8 catches, 143, and a touchdown. Diontae Johnson, 12 catches, 111. I mean, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 4 catches, 149, and a touchdown, along with Davante Adams doing his thing, as we know. But either way, AJ Brown, a great matchup against Jacksonville. Should be easy for them. Michael Thomas is my number 6 because I have more confidence in Taysom Hill. Now, what it kind of seems is that Michael Thomas will have Drew Brees back potentially in week 15, which is fine. But as of right now, I think this is such an advantageous matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles that you cannot pass up on the opportunity to play Michael Thomas. I mean, when we look at what Michael Thomas has done just recently, again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was mentioning Keenan Allen and his matchup against Atlanta, Michael Thomas is against Atlanta in 2 out of the last 3 weeks has been fantastic. Has himself at least a minimum of 9 catches in both contests and a minimum of 104 receiving yards. So again, he's played fantastic against them. Plays against the Philadelphia Eagles that has struggled heavily against number 1 wide receivers. Specifically, as we remember a couple weeks back, DK Metcalf, 10 catches for 177 against that secondary. Really made Darius Slay look like he was slowing down in his career. And Davante Adams, 10 catches, 121, and 2 touchdowns. Of course, just this past week against Philadelphia secondary. So again, Michael Thomas should be in line for a great performance. I'm anticipating him doing so in conjunction with, of course, this offense just being able to blow them out, as maybe if in fact their defense continues to hold the rookie quarterback of Hurts on the other side, gives their opportunity, gives themselves more opportunity offensively to score. Our number 7 for this week is Justin Jefferson. And honestly, coming onto the scene and doing what he has done, it has been unpredictable. And it's just, I can't believe what kind of an animal he has turned into. I mean, the stat that I'm going to read is unbelievable. Since week 10, Justin Jefferson has scored 78.9 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. He is exactly tied with Davante Adams in that time frame. He's been just as good as Davante Adams since week 10. He's been playing out of his mind. He's coming off of a game in which he had, again, another double-digit target game, 9 catches, 121 through the air, and a receiving touchdown. Plays against Tampa Bay. Guys, how many times do I got to tell you how many points Tampa Bay gives up to wide receivers? I mean, Tyreek Hill, 13 catches, 269, had 200 receiving yards in the first half, had 3 receiving touchdowns in that game. And in the week prior to that, Cooper Kupp, 11 catches, 145, while Robert Woods went for 12 in 130 and 1. This secondary can't stop wide receivers. They are hemorrhaging in the secondary. It has been a huge part of exposing them. As long as you can protect Kirk Cousins, this wide receiver core should be able to deliver. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump on the back of our next wide receiver because, again, Justin Jefferson only succeeds with, of course, Adam Thielen also being there, having him succeed in this offense. We have seen, of course, both these guys succeed without each other, but when they are both on the field as of right now, they are both playing out of their mind. You know, Adam Thielen's coming off of a week of 11 targets, 8 catches, 75 yards and a touchdown, 17.5 fantasy points, playing against Tampa Bay. When we talk about the fact that Justin Jefferson, since week 10, has just as many points, literally identical amount of points as Davante Adams, let's not forget, okay, Tyreek Hill's number 1 since week 10. And we have Justin Jefferson and Davante Adams tied at 2 and 3. And number 4, yours truly, Adam Thielen, with 1 less game played as the number 4 wide receiver since week 10 in terms of total fantasy points. This is a fantastic matchup. I mean, they allowed Patrick Mahomes to do whatever he wanted, and Tyreek Hill just dominated that secondary. Jared Goff dominated that secondary with his number 1 and 2 receiving options. I think Kirk Cousins playing as well as he has, throwing 3+ touchdowns, 4 out of the last 5 contests, that is just going to continue to lead to their success. I'm extremely excited about this, Minnesota Vikings duo of wide receivers, if you can't already tell. We have Diontae Johnson as our number 9. I mean, Diontae Johnson's been incredible. I mean, he's still averaging 12.5 targets per game in full games played this season alone. He continues to get insane opportunity. Just this past week against the Washington football team, 12 targets leading to 8 receptions, 71 receiving yards and a touchdown. Now, I understand Diontae Johnson leads the league in terms of total drop passes at the wide receiver position, and I get it. That's a lot of opportunity left and a lot of points left on the field, but this upcoming week, he has a fantastic matchup in my opinion. Tre'Davious White is a name that a lot of people at least look at the corner position and think he's a great corner. He could probably lock down a number 1 wide receiver, but it hasn't really been the case this year. Just recently, we had Brandin Aiyuk go for 595 and 1 against that secondary. We had Keenan Allen, 4 catches, 40 yards and a touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins, 7 catches, 127 and a touchdown. DK Metcalf, 7 catches, 108 and a touchdown. They've given up their fair share of points to wide receivers recently. And I honestly think that the Buffalo Bills, even though their secondary does have talent, it is kind of falling apart as of late. Their front 7 is kind of picking it up. But again, there's an opportunity to take advantage of this secondary. The Pittsburgh Steelers, coming off of their first loss of the season, will try to at least reestablish themselves. Their number 1 receiver is Diontae Johnson. And as long as this offense is scoring, he's going to find success. And I expect him to do so as we continue as our number 9. The amount of points he's scored recently has just been insane. We have DeAndre Hopkins as our number 10. Now, here's the thing about D-Hop. Now, a lot of people, of course, similarly, were afraid of, DeAndre Hopkins' last week matchup because Ramsey, what can Ramsey do to him? Like I mentioned, he has played well against Ramsey since 2017. Every single contest, it is either him scoring a touchdown or getting over 100 yards. He really does play well against Ramsey. He's learned to do so as they've played twice, a year every single time when they were on the Houston Texans and Jacksonville Jaguars. Now you got a Rams and Cardinals matchup. We'll see each other twice a year. And of course, DeAndre Hopkins is going to play well, but this upcoming week, he takes on another tough cornerback. You got Bradbury, who just locked down Metcalf for 5 catches and 80 yards. And even though we have seen other wide receivers like Terry McLaurin go for 7 and 1, 15 and 1, and we've seen Mike Evans go 5 catches, 55 yards and a touchdown, I am still concerned to an extent that with Kyler Murray kind of slowing down, really not being able to figure it out in terms of this offense, not getting, Christian Kirk more involved, not having a number 2 viable wide receiver, it is hurting this offense. And I think it is in turn hurting DeAndre Hopkins as he's pulling more coverage because you don't have that deep threat pulling deep coverage like Christian Kirk earlier was. So that is why DeAndre Hopkins fallen a little bit. It is a tougher matchup against this New York Giants secondary. And that is why we put him at 10, even though I do believe Hopkins is going to be able to produce regardless of who's covering him. Again, he is just a little bit less valued than the guys I've mentioned before. We have Calvin Ridley as our number 11. So again, the Los Angeles Chargers, they're pretty good in the secondary. Now, I understand Calvin Ridley's been playing fantastic. I mean, in the last 3 games, he has had 28 total targets. I think it's been 9, 9, and 10 just this past week. He's coming off of a week in which he had 5 catches for 108 receiving yards against the Saints secondary. The week prior, he had himself, 60 yards and a receiving touchdown. He's put together great performances. He's averaging about 13 points in a half PPR in the last couple of weeks on a consistent basis. Now, if you go ahead and you put him against the secondary, of course, there have been teams that have produced against them just recently. Stefon Diggs had 9 catches, 118, while John Brown in that offense, 8 catches for 99. Brandin Aiyuk, 8 catches, 91, and a touchdown against that secondary, along with DeAndre Hopkins, 10 catches, 103, and a touchdown. So the Los Angeles Chargers, even though just recently they have been better in terms of stopping opposing wide receivers, even though somehow, some way, they gave up 2 receiving touchdowns to the Patriots offense of all teams, there is still a possibility, of course, that Calvin Ridley could find himself some opportunity and make himself a great play. As long as Julio's on the other side of the field pulling coverage and he gets to play against the second best corner on that team, he should be able to be a pretty relevant wide receiver this week. Moving on to our number 12, we have ourselves Allen Robinson. And I know perhaps if you're an Allen Robinson owner, you're disappointed with his last week's performance. 6 catches for 75 may not have been the greatest one, considering we were anticipating a touchdown to be relayed with that. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but this upcoming week has a very good opportunity of doing so against the Houston Texans. They do not have a great secondary. With Bradley Roby out, there is going to be a huge gap to fill, and I don't think a lot of teams are going to be able to stop a guy like Allen Robinson, much less a defense that doesn't have a number 1 cornerback anymore. Just this last week, T.Y. Hilton took advantage of it with 8 catches, 110 and a touchdown. Demir Bird a couple weeks back, 6 catches, 132 and a touchdown against that secondary. DJ Chark has blown up against that secondary for 7 catches, 146 and a touchdown. We've seen Davante Adams go for 196 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. A lot of teams have taken advantage of the Houston secondary. I think Mitchell Trubisky has gotten better over the weeks progressing. They are running the ball. Though they are losing games, I think this offense should be able to score in bunches against Houston. Should be a very competitive back and forth scoring game. Allen Robinson should be a great play this week. Moving on to our number 13, we have Stefon Diggs. So Diggs is coming off another one of his normal performances. He's getting targeted highly. He's catching the ball a lot. 11 targets, 10 receptions, 92 yards. In a full PPR, he has a higher ranking. But in a half PPR, when you're only getting 5 points per the receptions instead of 10, it is a huge difference maker. Turns a 14.2 performance to a 19.2 performance. Turns you into a middling wide receiver in the wide receiver 2 conversation to a top 12 guy. So unfortunately, that is the case. But as it currently stands, they take on Pittsburgh, and they're coming off of a hot week in which Josh Allen threw and passed for 4 passing touchdowns, and it seems to me that Pittsburgh, that is their biggest weakness. Throwing the ball on them is where you're going to find your biggest advantage, and that's where Washington did. They threw the ball to Logan Thomas. They threw the ball to Sims that had himself 5 catches for 92 yards. Weeks prior, we have Hollywood Brown catching the ball 4 times, 85 yards and a touchdown. I know it was a big play, but again, their secondary can't tackle. It's the biggest difference maker. Higgins, 7 catches, 115 and a touchdown. A.J. Brown, 6 catches, 153 and a touchdown. Wide receivers have produced against this Pittsburgh secondary. That is their biggest weakness. And of course, as long as Stefon Diggs is going to continue to be their number 1 guy, he should be great. We have Tyler Lockett as our number 14, even though his performance this last week wasn't great. 9.3 fantasy points, 6 catches on 9 targets, 63 receiving yards. I'll take it. I'm not going to complain about it because I think he'll have another one of these bigger games this week against the Jets, specifically because, again, like we mentioned earlier in conjunction with DK Metcalf, these guys can't stop the pass. I'll go ahead and reiterate the stats. I mean, just recently, Keenan Allen, 16 catches, 145 and a touchdown. Jacoby Myers, 12 catches for 169. Devontae Parker, 8 catches for 119. Tyreek Hill, 4 catches, 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. They really can't stop the pass. They can stop the run, that's for sure, but they cannot stop opposing wide receivers. They just fired their defensive coordinator, Greg Williams. They're going to be in a little bit of a shamble, I think. And as of right now, Tyler Lockett should be able to get back on track this week with Russell Wilson as my number 14. Number 15 is it's a tricky one. So Julio Jones is number 15, and only because he doesn't score touchdowns. This has been the issue with Julio Jones' entire career. I mean, there's only been, I think, 1 season, I think it was, 2012, that he had 10-plus receiving touchdowns, unfortunately. I could be wrong on that, someone could stat check that. But just this season alone, in the 9 games that he's played, He's only had 2 separate games in which he's had touchdowns. He scored 3 total touchdowns this season. One, in game he had 2 touchdowns. The other one he had 1. But the fact that he hasn't been able to at least get himself multiple touchdowns or, per game, or at least be like a Davante Adams, where every time they get down in the red zone, he is catching a touchdown, just speaks to how this offense just is dysfunctional to an extent and has continued to be dysfunctional over the last couple of years, regardless of changing offensive coordinators. So it's obviously been an issue. And as of right now, it scares me. Again, Los Angeles Chargers are going to put double coverage on him. They're going to put their best cornerback on them, Casey Hayward or Chris Harris Jr. It doesn't matter. They're going to throw the entire kitchen sink at Julio. Stop him and you'll stop, Matt Ryan. So as of right now, I still think Julio should be great. He had 10 targets, 6 catches for 94 yards, and should still be a viable option. It's just not somebody that I'm 100% over the moon about, because again, if he is not scoring touchdowns, his upside isn't there. And that is why he sits at the middle of the pack at 15. Mike Evans is our number 16. Now, going from Julio to Mike Evans in terms of rankings, I'm more excited about Mike Evans, but he is touchdown dependent. It's a little bit of the opposite, right? In comparison of like receptions and yardage, Julio's got that on lock. But when we're talking about touchdowns and scoring touchdowns on a consistent basis, that has been Mike Evans. He has scored 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. He's had 29 targets in the last 3 games. As of right now, he plays against the second best matchup at the wide receiver position. He is scoring touchdowns in bunches. And even with games in which he only catches the ball, 3 times, 2 touchdowns are going to save the week. 3 catches, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. You save your week there and you have yourself great performances. Just recently, Mike Evans, in my opinion, has been the number 1 wide receiver of this team and has continued to be, regardless of him even being out-targeted or out-received by the other wide receivers on this team, like a Chris Godwin, Gronkowski, and of course, Antonio Brown. But either way, I think Mike Evans should be a great play this week. He continues to score touchdowns, should be able to do it once again this week against Minnesota, find himself a great performance. We have Robby Anderson as our number 17, and I wanted to mention this. Of course, AJ Boye suspended 6 games out for the season. The other 2 wide receivers on this team, DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, have been considered high-risk contact for COVID. Now, the question is, are they going to be cleared to play this upcoming Sunday? If they are, then great, they can make the list. But as of right now, if Robby Anderson, even regardless if the other 2 play, in my opinion, seems like a guy that is going to be able to bounce back, have himself another good week here. He's coming off of a performance in which he had 4 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown against the Minnesota Vikings defense. He had himself, again, a couple performances here and there as of late that have been disappointing. But if he's going to be the number 1, he's going to be the guy practicing all week. Teddy Bridgewater's going to look in his direction all week long. And this upcoming week against Denver should be a pretty good play, to say the very least. I have a lot of confidence in Robby Anderson. And when, in comparison to the past, I've been a little bit standoffish with Robby Anderson, considering his inconsistency of scoring. I'm okay with him this week based on the circumstances that are surrounding both teams at the moment. We have Chris Godwin as our number 18, another one of these Tampa Bay Buccaneers receivers. Again, even though I really do like the duo of Jefferson and Thielen, and I really do like the combination of Mike Evans and Godwin, I think that these 2 guys, though they are given opportunity, it is not to the extent of which the other guys get. They're not getting, the yardage and or, in Chris Godwin's case, the touchdowns that he needs. Chris Godwin, as of late, has been good. I mean, just talking about his last 3 games, he's put up 40.7 fantasy points, averaging 13.56 fantasy points per game in the last 3 contests. That is with, 25 targets, 21 receptions, pretty good catch rate to say the very least, along with, of course, 242 yards, but only 1 receiving touchdown. He's still dealing with that finger injury that he's obviously dealt with even before. Coming off the bye week, he should be good to go. He is a little bit, been given the questionable tag and maybe limited throughout practice this week. But I'm expecting him to be perfectly fine and ready to go. And therefore, that is why he is at my number 18 wide receiver position with a great matchup on hand. We have Corey Davis as our number 19. You can't tell me that Corey Davis is going to come off of an 11-catch, 182-yard game with a touchdown and not be ranked high in my rankings. He has been unbelievable as of late. Since week 7, he is the number 7 overall wide receiver in fantasy football. That is a stat that a lot of people do not look for, and one that I have obviously been aware of because, again, since coming back from his COVID situation, he has been unstoppable in this offense, scoring 10-plus points almost every week, getting himself more utilization in this offense, taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, giving up the 6th most points to opposing wide receivers. I mentioned earlier with A.J. Brown. I know A.J. Brown typically is the guy that has more upside and gets more opportunity. And to be honest, that's just a fact. That's how it's going to work. But as long as Corey Davis is getting the amount of targets he has been getting, he's going to be able to produce. I mean, Justin Jefferson, 9 catches, 121 and a touchdown last week against Jacksonville, along with Thielen scoring and getting himself usage there with 75 yards and a touchdown. We have Jarvis Landry a couple weeks back, 8 catches, 143 and a touchdown. Diontae Johnson, 12 catches, 111. I mean, Corey Davis is in line for another great week. I'm firing him up without a doubt in my mind. We have Terry McLaurin as our number 20. So here's my thing. Terry McLaurin, he didn't have a great performance. He actually was a non-factor in that game in a matchup in which, of course, he should have been utilized a lot. But that's Alex Smith. He doesn't want to throw the ball down the field very often. And when he does, it doesn't always turn into the greatest outcome. So as of right now, he was just check down Andy, throwing the ball to J.D. McKissic 10 times, feeding the ball to, of course, Logan Thomas down the field, and, Sims a little bit here and there. So as of right now, playing against San Francisco, I do not fear Richard Sherman at all. I think he's slow. I think he's out of his prime. And I think a guy like Terry McLaurin should be able to show him up. I mean, wide receivers in the last couple of weeks have done so. Stefon Diggs, 10 catches, 92 yards. Davante Adams, 10 catches, 173 and a touchdown. We also had Cole Beasley, because of the fact that the slot cornerback of the San Francisco 49ers is out and on the injured reserve. Cole Beasley dominated. 9 catches, 130 and a touchdown. If you go ahead and move Terry McLaurin around this offense, whether it's Verrett, I don't even care. He is going to be able to perform. I think as the number 20, I'm expecting a little bit less productivity in this offense because, again, the running back position is a little shaky. They might be just check down Andying again without Antonio Gibson being the steady stream of offense there. But we'll see how this kind of, transpires this week. We have Jarvis Landry as our 21. I mean, again, this is another player that has been on fire as of late. In the last 2 weeks, he's had 21 targets, has had a receiving touchdown in each of the last 2 games, and has also had 16 receptions and 205 receiving yards. So just in the last 2 weeks, monstrous. He's going to be playing against the Baltimore Ravens. He has had a very good history in the past of playing against them and putting up good performances. Even week 1, he was fine. It wasn't the best performance, but it was still a performance that, I'm saying, okay, I'll take that from a wide receiver 3 option, wide receiver 2 option. And just the recent performance of this offense in terms of being able to pass the ball and get more opportunity for Jarvis Landry gives me more confidence. So again, the fact that Andy Dalton was able to go against the Baltimore Ravens secondary and complete a passing touchdown to Michael Gallup, in which he had 7 catches, 86 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper, 5 catches, 43 yards and a touchdown. You got more usage out of a guy like CeeDee Lamb. It is apparent that the Cleveland Browns offense has improved incredibly, and they're going to continue to do so going forward. All right, we have Amari Cooper as our 22. So here's the thing about Amari Cooper. I have a lot of confidence in him. The fact that he scored a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks is fantastic. In the last 3 weeks alone, he has been the number 10 overall wide receiver in fantasy football, averaging 8 targets per game. He's coming off of a performance, of course, of 9 targets, 5 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown against Baltimore secondary. Takes on the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm confident because, of course, Cincinnati Bengals have been dropping like flies in terms of their secondary. A lot of injuries have been taking place. And of course, this is a revenge game for Andy Dalton. I think Dalton will be able to connect with his receivers, specifically his number 1 guy, Amari Cooper. We have Robert Woods as our number 23. I'm concerned about the Los Angeles Rams offense. I mean, the New England Patriots just smacked the other team in LA. They're staying in LA the whole week to then potentially smack us on Thursday. So here's the thing. Robert Woods has played against Stephon Gilmore in the past. You go back to the Super Bowl in 2018 or the 2018-2019 season. And yeah, Robert Woods had himself 75 total yards, 6 catches. Okay, you put up a 10-point performance technically in a half PPR scoring format. But if you're looking for great production, I don't know if you're going to find that in this specific matchup. I understand, there's been a lot of wide receivers that Stephon Gilmore's locked up over the years. But just recently, DeAndre Hopkins, 6 catches, 55 yards only. Keenan Allen, 5 catches, 48 yards only. So unless Robert Woods is going to get himself a pity rushing touchdown, he's been getting consistent amount of targets, 10 plus each of the last 3 weeks. But again, I am afraid of this Bill Belichick defense because if Goff does not come out firing on all cylinders, it could be a little bit of a hesitation. But either way, Robert Woods still has value. We have Brandin Aiyuk as our number 24. A stat that I wanted to mention because Brandin Aiyuk has been unbelievable. In the last 5 games, he's averaging 15.2 fantasy points per game. He's at least in the last 5 contests had at least 1 receiving touchdown, or if not a receiving touchdown, over 100 receiving yards. He's been unbelievable coming off of an 18-point performance. Takes on the Washington football team this week. Again, their secondary has been playing great. They've got a pretty, good group of guys there that's been locking down. But as long as everybody's kind of focused on Deebo Samuel, Brandin Aiyuk is going to feast with Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins is continuing to get him the ball anytime he is active and ready to go. That kind of consistency of play with each other in the last 5 contests that Brandin Aiyuk has played, just continues to speak volumes on his utilization in this offense. I'm 100% down with playing Brandin Aiyuk this week in the matchup. We have Cole Beasley as our 25. Another player that has been unbelievable. In the last 3 games, listen to this stat. In the last 3 games, Cole Beasley has had 28 targets, 22 receptions, 264 receiving yards, and 3 total touchdowns. 2 receptions and 1 passing touchdown. He's averaging 18.1 fantasy points per game in the last 3 weeks. Just let that sink in. And I know I have him at my number 25 spot, but I have a hard time putting him any higher. That being said, he's a guy that I'm confident starting. 9 total catches this last week, 130 yards and a touchdown. Plays against Pittsburgh. If in fact this offense is going to have to pass the ball, because again, it is Pittsburgh's defense, it is going to be hard to run the ball. Cole Beasley's going to continue to get utilization. He's going to get more and more targets in his direction. If he's surpassing this double-digit target count on a weekly basis, he's obviously going to produce because his catch rate is as high as it is. Beasley's another guy I'm 100% good with going into the week. We have Marvin Jones Jr. You want to hear another stat about great wide receivers. Since week 7, Marvin Jones is the number 9 overall wide receiver in fantasy. Takes on the Green Bay Packers coming off of a week in which he had 8 catches on 12 targets for 116 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown against the Chicago Bears defense. I mean, oh my goodness. We're talking about receivers that I'm ranking from 24 on, that are just monsters. That's how depth worthy these wide receivers. I mean, the wide receiver position has so much talent right now. It's unbelievable how great these players are playing. Now, that being said, the Green Bay Packers are a pretty good secondary. Recently, Greg Ward this past week had himself 3 catches, 57 yards and a touchdown, garbage time. Allen Robinson, 8 catches, 74 yards, 2 receiving touchdown, garbage time. Richie James in the contest, I think it was a Thursday night or a Monday night game against Green Bay in San Francisco, had himself 9 catches, 184 and a touchdown, garbage time. So if Green Bay goes ahead and gets up early, there is no Kenny Golladay, and we have Marvin Jones running around the field. Garbage time will take place once again, and he will find some value. And that is why I have him at number 26. 27 is T.Y. Hilton, another player that has been playing out of his mind recently. Coming off of a game in 8 catches, 110 yards and a touchdown. The week prior had himself, 4 catches, 80 yards and a touchdown. He plays against Las Vegas. You got to be kidding me, right? Las Vegas. Jamison Crowder came out of nowhere and was revived by their secondary, just giving him more opportunities, not being able to cover him. 5 catches, 47 and 2 touchdowns. Calvin Ridley, 6 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill, 11 catches, 102 and a touchdown. Keenan Allen, 9 catches, 103 and a touchdown. Las Vegas does not have a good defense. And I think regardless of who plays against them, specifically, if you're going to talk about a good AFC team like the Indianapolis Colts, they should be able to feast, especially considering the play action is going to hit hard. T.Y. Hilton's a good play. Marquise Brown, another player that just recently, catching the hot hand, getting into the fantasy football playoffs, could end up winning you some games here. Coming off of 2 back-to-back weeks of a receiving touchdown, has had himself more and more opportunity in terms of targets, receptions. That is obviously going to lead to success. That's how it works in fantasy football. As long as you're given opportunity, these guys have enough talent to deliver. And I believe the Cleveland matchup should be one that he could deliver on. Again, we're talking about defenses that just, the Cleveland secondary can't stop anybody. They don't have a healthy defense. I know they were missing Denzel Ward last week. He could miss again this week. And there's a chance. We're talking about Corey Davis going for 182 yards and a touchdown. And then the week before we had Colin Johnson, 96 and a touchdown. Like, everybody's scoring touchdown against Cleveland. That's just how it works. And I think Marquise Brown, as long as he continues to score, imagine just a couple 6-point swings here and there makes a big difference in fantasy. It makes him the number 28 when he wasn't even ranked last week. We have Claypool as our 29. So my only issue with Claypool, touchdown dependency. It is what Marquise Brown, T.Y. Hilton are depending on right now. But they are running with the hot hand, and I'm ready to go with them. If Chase Claypool cannot score touchdowns, if he's going to be the number 3 receiver, maybe number 4 receiver in terms of targets on this team, that is something of concern. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, hey, listen, if you can put together a touchdown against this Buffalo defense, we're good to go. But as of right now, I'm a little concerned about it. Hopefully he'll turn it around this week and kind of wash away my concerns for a week 14 matchup. Cooper Kupp's my number 30. Again, it's a tough matchup. Unless Jared Goff comes out and is 3 for 3 passing in the first drive and ends up at least, getting a field goal, I'm going to be afraid. If Jared Goff comes out and is 1 for 4 passing in the first drive, I'm 100% going to live bet the game that the New England Patriots win by a lot. So as of right now, Cooper Kupp, even though he's getting targets, double digits, 9 targets last week, 8 receptions, 73 receiving yards, great performance. We'll take that any given week, but there's no touchdowns involved. The upside's not there. It's a tough matchup. That is my concern as of this moment. We're moving on to our number 31. We have Brandin Cooks. Again, we got to fill this, the spot that Will Fuller has kind of left vacant. We need a number 1 wide receiver to step up. Even though Brandin Cooks did have himself 5 catches, 65 yards, didn't find himself in the end zone, he has still been a pretty good wide receiver. Since his injury, he's kind of surpassed him, and he's gotten to week 5. From week 5 till now, he's been the number 13 overall wide receiver in a half PPR scoring format, playing against Chicago, a defense that, again, has given up their fair share of points. Just talking about this past week, we had Matt Stafford go for 3 passing touchdowns and over 400 passing yards. They give up points, to say the very least. So again, then we have another player that has a good matchup. We have Mike Williams playing against Atlanta, giving up the 3rd most points to opposing wide receivers. In the last couple of weeks, Mike Williams has gotten himself end zone targets. That is what his main value is. In the last 6 games, he's had a total of 41 total targets. This last week, 9 targets, 4 receptions, 43 yards. There have been multiple times in the last couple of weeks in which he's had an end zone target. He's either dropped it, defensive pass interference, things that have obviously based on circumstance, defenders trying to not get embarrassed out there, have had to pull him down and at least force him not to score. I don't blame them. That is the nature of the sport, and those are the variables that we can't account for. But as of right now, I'm thinking that this offense is going to be firing on all cylinders against that secondary, and I think Mike Williams should have himself a pretty good opportunity to score and be a fantasy-relevant receiving option. Deebo Samuel is our 33. Again, target-wise, this guy's been great. He's coming off of a week in which he had 13 targets. Now he had 9 targets, though the reception count is just half as many. He had 11 2 weeks back, hit 6 this past week. It's obviously going to diminish his value, but Washington, again, like I mentioned, Diontae Johnson, 8 catches, 71 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper, 6 catches, 112 and a touchdown. Marvin Jones Jr., 8 catches, 96 and a touchdown. Number 1 wide receivers have been playing pretty well against them. And even though they have been one of the better secondaries, I think they're kind of, in terms of matchup-wise, been giving a lot of teams the workaround. In terms of, hey, they are ranked highly in terms of they're not giving up a lot of points, but that's mainly because early in the season, they couldn't stop the run. And now it's really starting to show that their secondary is a part of their weakness defensively. But either way, I think Deebo Samuel should be a pretty decent play going forward. We have Juju Smith-Schuster as our 34. Now, Juju, he gets targets, he gets receptions. In a full PPR, I'm 100% good with playing him. In a half PPR, getting 7 catches for 28 yards isn't going to cut it. Not going to cut it. You need yourself a touchdown. You need yourself more yardage. His average depth of target this season has been all-time low. It's numbers that I can't understand, but he's getting targets, 37 in the last 4 games. I'll take that. But in terms of opportunity, not enough touchdowns, not enough touches to at least get him into the end zone on a consistent enough basis. But again, this was a down week for the entire Steelers team. I think they'll be able to bounce back and get themselves back on track this week. Number 35 is DJ Chark. Now, I understand Tennessee, my goodness, they give up a lot of points to wide receivers. We're talking about the Browns. Their top 3 wide receivers going for 16 receptions, 249, and 3 touchdowns against that defense. There's just their top 3 wide receivers. And then we had T.Y. Hilton the week before, 4 catches, 81 and a touchdown when he hadn't caught a touchdown the whole season. So again, Tennessee can't stop wide receivers. They can't stop the run. They're just a lackluster defense to say the very least. But as it currently stands, DJ Chark has been lackluster himself. He's been injured. He's had no production. He's had no opportunity. Is he going to bounce back? I'm hoping so, and that is why he's here. Last option I wanted to mention is Keke Coutee, because I do think that even though it is a Chicago matchup, which should be difficult, Deshaun Watson is going to throw the whole time. That's how this offense functions. You're not going to run the ball. You're going to pass. And if someone's going to run for a touchdown, it'll be either David Johnson on the 1-yard line or Deshaun Watson scrambling. I think Keke Coutee is going to continue to establish himself. I'm not 100% certain that he's going to get up to those numbers, 9 catches, 140. That's tough. That's tough to redo on a weekly basis, but it gives me confidence going forward. That's why I wanted to mention him. There's a lot of names that I didn't mention on today's video. Keep up to date on my latest ranking, patreon.com/AndrewKirchhoff down in the description. Thank you everybody for watching. These are my week 14 wide receiver rankings. We'll see you guys either tomorrow for the quarterback and tight end video before Thursday Night Football's game, and or later this week in terms of either Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll cover all that kind of stuff. But either way, you guys know the deal. Thank you everybody for watching, and until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.